Chapter 35, Redemption, Step Forward. Arriving in East Block after 6.5 years in the hole was an odd new experience. I actually felt a sensation of butterflies in my stomach. While I was being placed in a holding cell, Chico was being escorted out of an adjacent one. I asked him where he was going. His response, "To the hole, cuz." Though rough around the edges with an explosive temper, Chico was cool. He was the flip side of young Kerm, who had an unmistakable rage in his voice, posture, and behavior. What I respected most about Chico was his appetite for learning. I jokingly called him Wild Man. He was a gifted mathematician. I was housed in 3 East Block 106 next door to an Indian whom I befriended named Apache. He conveniently ended up being in charge of the phone. The following morning on the yard, I was cheerfully greeted by Hurt, Mad Dog, Holloway, Cricket, Taco, Wimp, Little L, X-Lax, Ant, Louisiana Smooth, Ocean, Square, Silent, Queasy, Dogs, and Grandpa. When the hoopla died down, I was embraced by an evolving brother named KC, whom I've known for many years. Though he wasn't into the gang life, he was a personable brother with a heart. In addition to sharing the fact of being black and battling this killing machine called capital punishment, we both strove for knowledge and freedom. Scanning the yard, I saw that some were nervous, those who had something to hide. There was apprehension in their little eyes and in their strange smiles. It didn't matter to me. I planned to associate only with the few who had proven to be stand-up men over the years. As long as I was left alone, nobody had anything to worry about. I was harmless. If my interest had been revenge, there were so many prison provocateurs and riffraff that I would have had to arm myself with weapons in both hands and some strapped to other parts of my body to make sure I didn't miss anybody. No matter how deeply I despised particular individuals, they were not worthy my violating my spiritual resolve. I even gave the individual who offended me the most of my assurance in front of God and everybody who could hear me. You have absolutely nothing to fear from me, because violence is no longer an option for me. Later that same day, I received a visit from Brbr. I got to dine on vending machine food while we engaged in conversation about the children's books and other projects. I was aware of being closely monitored by guards, not just in the visiting room, but also when I was on the yard, tier, and in the cell. Brbr noticed that I was under critical surveillance in the visiting area and was surprised when I told her guards were making side bets about how long I'd remain in East Block. They had no way of knowing that I was no longer the same dope they believed they were betting on. In spite of the controversy, Brbr and I prayed, as we always do near the end of our visit, and thanked God for our surviving each day. It was as though I was living in a subjective world impervious to their negative vibes. Having overcome my own ignorance, I can understand those who remain blinded by the same dense veil that once covered my eyes. Returning to East Block was like jumping from the fire into the frying pan. I rejected its old pecking order struggles and the mind games. I had no plans to get caught up in its stagnant conditioning. I didn't believe in existing just because I have a pulse. There is more to life than steel bars, senseless barbarity, prisoners, guards, gun towers, and the other hokum. Though physically, I cannot separate myself from the disorder of prison, mentally I can escape to Africa or beyond the sun's distance, 93 million miles from Earth. Every aspect of my struggle was devised to overcome the elements that held me in my bondage, beginning with myself, then working outward. I was beginning to understand that my experiences with these dysfunctional elements, the drug addiction, poverty, gangsterism, racism, and other roadblocks, these were excuses that had defined my life. No longer would my actions be dictated by blind ignorance, nor would I ever again allow the excuse of circumstances to dictate who I should be. It was routine studying and questioning that prompted my soul searching. I began to develop the sense of critical reasoning from which sprang the first strings of conscience. This shocked me. This was the moment redemption fused with my life. Until then, I didn't have an inkling what was happening to me. There was no defining moment that marked my redemption. No voice of reason from the sky, no jolt of energy. The path of education and introspection enabled me to reason and develop a conscience that rejects criminality, drugs, and senseless violence. Redemption allowed me to acknowledge and atone for my past indiscretions, vow never to repeat or create new ones, and extend an olive branch to youths and adults who desire peace. My redemption is a continual process of change that promotes day-to-day improvement in my life. No one can give redemption to me. No one can intercede on my behalf. I have to earn it myself. Even now, attempting to clarify this experience, I fall short. I don't expect anyone who's not had this sort of experience to comprehend it or be able to relate to the redemptive struggle by a condemned man. I have swum in the gutter among the dead, but had the fortitude to step out of the filth, wash off, and walk among the living. Redemption is not a discriminal commodity based on classism, elitism, political favoritism, gender, race, creed, or color. Redemption awaits everybody. God's mercy needs no defense. Still, there are racists posing as liberals, conservatives, moderates, and religious folks who believe black men are inferior and incapable of atonement and an overall change. I know I'm expected to languish in violent stupidity on death row until my execution, but I cannot. This prison environment is not a reflection of me, nor am I addicted to its deadening and vicious manipulations. In 1995, a succession of arrivals entered East Block. First Chico, then Tretch, Ghetto, Evil, and Kerm. Each of them entered the setting with an intention to function at the highest order of discipline. To have us all on the same yard was a joyous occasion and a proud moment for me, knowing I had held firm during this extended test of my discipline. The convention center was larger than a football field with multiple floors. It took Brbr 2 exhaustive days to visit 6,000 plus booths. Many publishers found favor with my work, but shied away because of where I was incarcerated. One black man, Amos Wilson, was developing his own publishing company and showed an interest in my work. Wilson was a black psychologist and author of several books addressing the dilemma of black youth. But before we could connect, Mr. Wilson died suddenly and unexpectedly. While walking the floors of the convention for 2 days, Brbr located a publisher at Rosen Publishing Group, whose books were aimed chiefly at schools and libraries. He agreed to publish my work. The publication process was tedious, having to meet the syntax standards of 2 editors, Brbr and the publisher's editors. After months of correcting and rewriting, the book was ready. Brbr told me that the numerous chapters in my single children's book had been transformed into an 8-book series. The series was published in September 1996. The books quickly were accepted in the poor black school districts, as well as in middle-class schools and libraries, because gangs had become a growth industry among white children as well as minorities. In South Central Los Angeles, at West Athens Elementary School, students asked if they could take the books home on their first day back at school after summer vacation. This sort of request was unprecedented. The West Athens school principal, Barbara Lake, is quoted in the Los Angeles Times, September 11, 1996, saying that she could think of no other set of books that prompted parents to jam the school switchboard, asking where they could buy their very own copies. When the mainstream media got wind of anti-violence children's books authored by a death row prisoner, their curiosity triggered further investigation. NBC's Today Show did a story on the books. After that, reporters and journalists across America and around the world scrambled for telephone interviews with me and Brbr. Some journalists thought I had a hidden agenda and set out to expose me to the public. Others, after meeting me for an interview, would comment on my sincerity and intelligence, and then, in their articles, stick daggers into my back to appease the gods' balanced journalism. But no one could ignore the book's power to capture the attention of those troubled youths who dislike reading, but chose my books over many others. Magazines and newspaper articles displayed beaming faces of children, parents, teachers, and librarians endorsing the books. In 1997, Brbr and I came up with an idea for an educational website, www.tookie.com, that has had hundreds of thousands of internet visitors from all walks of life. I wrote another book, Life in Prison, for junior and high school youths. Published in 1998, it has won 2 national book honors, including one from the American Library Association. During this time, I decided to embrace Swahili names. Tretch and Evil chose Swahili names that best depict the type of person I have become. Tretch chose Ajamu, meaning he fights for what he wants. Evil chose Naimki, God's gift. The third name all three of us adopted is Kamara, he who teaches from experience. In choosing names for one another, Evil became Ajani, he who fights for possession, and Tretch became Adisi. As part of my transition and redemption, I'm extremely proud to have my Swahili name, Jamu Nyamki Kamara, which resonates with who I am. I feel no allegiance or kinship to my slave names, despite their being patronymic, a name descended from the father. Although I am on death row, my life has new meaning. I no longer feel as if my existence is of no consequence. It was only natural that in my reawakening and cleansing, I discarded the old and adopted the new. With the exception of my mother and Brbr, everybody else had written me off the moment I was sentenced to die, and I was mentally dead up to the precise second I had made the conscious decision to redefine and redeem myself. And so, I am alive. The maze that once appeared to have no exit has been forced open for passage. Hear me, black man, Indian, Caucasian, Asian, Mexican, Jew, Arab, others. There is a path out of desolation. Look within. As my life evolved, I was still doing interviews over the phone and face to face. One of the best and most enlightening visits was with Brbr, David Evans, an international peace mediator, and 3 South Africans, Joanna Thomas, Mohau Majukembaya, and Penny Foley, from the Center for Conflict Resolution Youth Project and Johannesburg's Joint Enrichment Project. The visit was unforgettable. Adisa engaged in a dialogue with Mau and Ajani, and I talked with David, Brbr, and Joanne, and Penny. I had read about the kindred spirit existing between blacks in America and the blacks in the motherland, but I never expected to experience such a powerful feeling that drew me close to Joanne and Mohau. Other than our black faces and ancestry, we shared social blights, poverty, drugs, racism, disease, street gangs, illiteracy, rapid prison growth, Afrocide, and other madnesses. I was taken aback by Brother Mohau's humility and his congenial disposition. He was a black man from the motherland who had no misunderstanding about what constituted his manhood, nor did he display a violent air of toughness with a street thug swagger. His words were articulate without venom. His fortitude, humble spirit, and absence of arrogance was in total contrast to what I saw in America. His inner warrior shined with reserved dignity. Not once did the words ninja or bitch enter our dialogue. Meeting Mohau pointed me toward a deeper learning of the art of humility while maintaining a resolute pride. After taking a few group photos, we sat for 30 more minutes discussing our founding project, the Internet Project for the Street Peace. This program will connect kids in the United States and in South Africa to communicate, learn, and be mentored via email and computer chat room. I wanted children on both continents to evolve into culturally conscious adults, bridging the gap that we adults have failed to mend. The encounter was refreshing, allowing me to reclaim the nexus served since African slavery began to claim black lives, families, and psyches. As my visitors rose to leave, we made plans to keep in touch and explore other ideas to bridge and benefit our continents. Later that year, I received a visit from actor Mike Farrell, a star from the comedy sitcom MASH, political activist and chairperson of Death Penalty Focus, an anti-death penalty organization. Barbara Disa, an associate of Mike's, were present as well. Our discussion centered on the possibility of creating a movie out of my memoirs. I listened intently to the conversation, aware that this was an embryonic stage in which will become a long and challenging project. Actually, I know of only one person capable of transforming our ideas into tangible realities, Barbara. I call her the human angel. While walking with Barbara and Mike inside the visiting room, the topic of my redemption surfaced. I stressed that I had not undertaken a dynamic interior change. There would be no atonement for me. I was able to eliminate the vile nature of my past, the impulsive behavior, foul language, irrationality, vengeance, and non-spiritual existence through reflection and prayer. No longer do I possess defeatist dreams that kill my potential for envisioning hope and progress. But my redemption is small and self-serving if I fail to assist the violence-ridden communities from which I came. I wasn't sure Mike understood precisely what I was trying to verbalize. But a person does have to understand the structure of a rose in order to acknowledge its beauty. As long as he recognized I was not the same person I had been, that was good enough for me. I told Mike and the others that my redemption was not a hazy fantasy in which a street thug becomes a good guy and lives happily ever after. I said that my mind was no longer polluted and that the decades of personal vice and of cripping, of the deeply rooted psychological illness that drove me had been resolved. But the cruel and desolate reality of prison is unforgiving. As long as I remain in prison, I will continue to be challenged to remain a human being and not a beast. Just because I chose to readjust my thoughts and behavior, the small, claustrophobic world of death row did not shift. Death row is constructed for punishment and execution, not for reform. That reality is unchanged.